Gen AI is the technology that depreciated more in the history of technology. Like in 1 year, Gen AI depreciated 98%.
Welcome to another episode of the Advising the Advisors podcast. I'm your host, Bolu, and today we're taking a deep dive into one of the most transformative forces in modern business, generative AI and large-scale digital transformation. To help us unpack this, we're joined by Juan Martin, head of Deep Gen AI at Boston Consulting Group, and part-time professor at the University of Pennsylvania. Juan leads transformative AI projects across industries, from banking and telecommunications to retail and beyond. He specializes in generative AI, AI-powered automation, and business transformation at scale. He's also the driving force behind some of BCG's most innovative tools, including CallSight and Deep Customer Engagement AI, which help companies turn data into actionable business outcomes. Thanks for joining me today, Juan.
Thank you, Volu, for having me.
In this conversation, we'll explore how generative AI is reshaping business operations, the biggest challenges companies face when scaling AI beyond just pilots, and what AI-driven transformation will look like in 2030. So grab your coffee and let's get started. Okay, if you were to have a tea with any AI pioneer or business leader, if you will, past or present, who would they be and why?
Great question. And I think that's an easy one. I would have a tea with Turing. I think that the most interesting conversation that I could have with him is, he created the test to detect if a chatbot had the intelligence of a human by basically confusing judges on this. And I think that today he would be super proud of where humanity landed in this type of solutions, because today you can't perceive the difference at all. And I would like to get his opinion on where do you think this is going, and what would be your mathematical approach to testing these type of solutions. I think based on his experience, he would have a completely different point of view on why we are doing these tools and how we would test these tools. But I think it would be a very interesting conversation, to be honest.
So again, let's go into a bit of the myth busting segment, okay? It's one of the biggest myths about AI, again, I guess you assess if indeed it's a myth, is that it's not driving any real business impact today. Where are you seeing the biggest misconception in how companies can approach AI adoption?
I see companies making or confusing in three main dimensions. The first dimension is focusing too much in the model importance. A lot of companies make a huge, they think too much about which model will I use. And to be honest, models are a commodity. Every model has a huge level of quality, every model is good. Gemini, GPTs, Mistral, open source models. Models are at a baseline, they are very good. So the important is not in the model. The important is in everything that surrounds the model. So first myth is the important is not, the model is not so important. The second thing is I think organizations fail in another aspect, which is they focus on use cases and not in real transformations. And this has been a trend in the last 15 years, I would say, which is let's do a small POC, a small POC, a small POC. When you don't have the global view and you don't create a program which really generates impact and you manage it as a program, usually these POCs end in nothing, which is a trend that we are seeing a lot. But I'm seeing big organizations execute in the magnitude order of 60 to 90 POCs. The other second problem, which is too much experimentation, but not a structure of a program in place. And the third thing that I think it's a huge challenge is focus in technology and avoidance of focus in return on investment. So they see generative AI, a lot of organizations see generative AI as a technology improvement, but it's, I would say, a business accelerator. But as you are experimenting so much, companies do not understand that this is a capability that will allow you to activate new business, new models, new revenue activators. It's not just a technology. Having said that, organizations still go through the same technological compliance and bureaucratic processes than with any other technology.
So this focus squad, you mentioned again, their job is to take things to production to ensure that you get the life cycle. But again, going up that process, again, what is your recommendation for what that initial, again, how does this team decide what is worth pursuing, right? To your point, like they have to be focused. They have like to pick like a handful of things to go through them end to end. Is this like, what does that process look like in deciding what to attack?
Companies should apply the 80-20 rule, which is a typical consultants thing. It's depending on which project you are going to make. If it's a cost optimization or a top line impact project, you will decide what really moves the needle in your business. Today, there's a trend. Every business is starting in the same place, which is customer service. Why? Because impact is very directly translated into efficiencies or top line impact. And it's a very simple area to implement, very straightforward. But this varies between industries. But the balance that industries are making is, I will select cases that are not so complex or not so risky, that maximize the return on investment. And usually the equation lands in customer service being the most prioritized case.
Have you seen examples of, again, like after early like signs of ROI in customer service, they start like move into other things? They have more like conviction, if you will. Like, have you seen what that transition looks like?
Yes.
And what's the second, third act typically like?
Yes. A lot of people are working in operations after customer service. Everything that has to do with contract analysis, contracts automations, RFP answering, etc. And then the third layer, it's something that we call as all the staff units that serve, for example, human resources, finance, etc., increasing productivity in those internal areas. Methodology is different. We call it in BCG deploy. Instead of reshaping a business unit, you activate your internal workforce with specific GenAI solutions to make them more productive. And this is what we define as deploy. You give them end customer solutions like, Zoom AI. You give them ChatGPT. You give them copilots. You give them tools that will help them to be more productive. We even did an exercise in BCG where we were one of the first that activated ChatGPT at scale into our consultants. We've deployed this into a test group inside some of the consultants, not everyone, and we've tested them in specific dimensions. A consultant and an associate in BCG has a very specific job, which is structure a problem. Once you structure a problem, create the content to present the structure of the problem, and then try to resolve it, right? Of course, some data analysis involved in that process. We observed in the people that were using ChatGPT a 15% of increase in productivity, almost 7 hours per week were saved because of the usage of this. Yes, and mainly the consultants were creating their own GPTs. Their own GPTs is a configuration that you can do on this OpenAI ChatGPT solution where you can create specific GPTs for solving specific tasks. So some consultants created a GPT for data analysis, aggregations, transformations, etc. Other consultants were making GPTs for slide checking. Is this slide, adjusted with BCG policies of slides, etc.? And others were just generating some content or polishing some content because they created a GPT as this would be a partner that would be reviewing their content, document, data, and slides all together to give them feedback. So they arrived to our internal meetings, content review meetings, much more prepared.
Interesting. What is one capability that, again, whether yourself or just like anecdotally, didn't quite work on first trial, if you will? Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember perhaps 3 years ago, I was working with image generation. Yes, and it was not at the level at that moment. Yes, I've tested Midjourney heavily, and the output was not there. We wanted to do some automated campaigns for digital marketing campaigns. Yeah, so we were creating images out of the box so we can automate, for example, a Google Display ad or something like that.
I'm sorry, this was on behalf of a customer, not BCG internally, was it?
Not BCG, not the customer. This was more of I wanted to test if this use case would be ready 3 years ago. And the output was not great because of multiple things. But it was not ready to be launched in an automated way online. Now it is ready.
Yeah, I mean, and that kind of raises an interesting question, which is, again, like, as we know, like the rate of improvement of these models is very steep. The question is like, how do you like revisit again? Like if a client asks you for advice, you say, okay, today, like, can I use image generation for my marketing? You like, not quite. What does that interaction look like to like come back in 2 months? Is it actually things have changed now? Like, how do you like revisit your recommendations, especially as the models change? And imagine like, are you doing that more often than you would do before? I guess like in LLM world, your advice was probably like correct for like a longer time, but now like you could be like 2 months after, like actually I was kind of wrong.
Completely. Your point is super valid. And that happens in two main dimensions. The first one is in terms of quality and output, which is exactly this. Hey, we need to revisit this. I mean, this use case is now completely possible and it didn't make sense. And the second thing where we always come back, it's some use cases are not profitable. And because the cost component says, hey, okay, basically, I would be able to make this, but it's very expensive. But I mean, Gen AI is the technology that depreciated more in the history of technology. Like in 1 year, Gen AI depreciated 98%.
Right. So this is like the per token costs
Exactly. The purchasing costs of using a specific model. So if in 1 year you have a 98% of depreciation, a lot of use cases that were not profitable are going to be profitable. So most of the conversations are not on the output dimension, but on the profitability of implementing that use case.
Yeah. Interesting. Which one comes to mind as like recently as like one that went through the same cost curve ride, if you will?
So two cases. So we did an experiment with a client, which was the creation of a digital human, an avatar for a big Iberian bank. It was a Spanish-based bank. And we implemented this in a gaming technology. The cost of an avatar is very, very expensive. So when we implemented this, I would say 3 years ago, the avatar cost per conversation was like $4. Just for you to have a magnitude order, a contact center call in some countries is less than, I mean, in Europe is less than $2. In India is 25 cents. So an avatar technology would make it impossible for some clients to have an avatar. It would make no sense.
But to your point, like the quality was good enough. The
quality
nice.
was Fortnite quality. The quality was, I mean, this was using Unreal Engine. I mean, it was like speaking with a human, to be honest. Voice-wise, movements, lip movement. It was amazing. And the personalization that you could give is simply, you could make the human that you would like to make. I mean, it was like that. So we had a huge design phase. They designed the face that they wanted. But at that moment, it wouldn't make sense. You know, we just created it to learn, experiment, and see if the propensity of a customer would be higher if they would be speaking with an avatar. And this was a top line case. So it made sense from a profitability perspective because this avatar was selling and not servicing. If you would be comparing the cost of the avatar for servicing, it wouldn't make sense as a solution. But as it was impacting top line, the gross margin of, selling
the acquisition cost. Yeah,
exactly. That was basically, the acquisition cost was high, but the margin of selling a product was higher. So this made sense from a profitability perspective. Today, this technology is depreciating a lot because you don't need GPUs, because they made the rendering of these images not needing so much computation power. So now you can make simpler avatars, perhaps not so fancy and not so human, but the cost could have decreased probably, 3.5 or between 5 and 7 times, I would say.
Out of interest, have you had any client engagement that revisited avatars recently? Or you just imagine if they did, this would be a great time to do it? Or have you actually
Yes, in some industries, specifically some industries, basically more engaged with avatars are pharmaceuticals.
And the use case there now, is it still top line, again, like acquisition or more support?
Well, in pharmaceuticals, you have two main topics that can be handled by avatars, which is strange illnesses. It's a topic, for example, in Latin America, there are some strange illnesses that have very high ticket medication where they offer a support line specifically for strange illnesses. It's the name of for For example, if you have a strange illness, you have a line where you can call. And they wanted to put this type of avatars to serve their customers with a doctor that it's an avatar. The challenge there is that if you detect something in those conversations, you need to report it based on regulation. Yeah. So those topics. And then, of course, selling high-ticket medications also, it's a very interesting topic for them.
So let us switch gears a bit to some of the stuff you've worked on internally. CallSight. So like this is BCG's proprietary tool for analyzing interactions across contact centers and customer touchpoints. Talk us through CallSight. What is this and what problems is trying to solve?
Yeah, so CallSight is one of our three main capabilities. So we work in customer service transformations under three main dimensions. The first one is insights, exploding insights with CallSight and extracting hundreds and hundreds of variables from each interaction. The second one is what we define as Buddy. Buddy is our augmentation solution to empower telephonic agents or salespeople with real-time information during the call, streaming the audio. And the third one is Genie. And Genie is our workflow and business process automation tool. From conversations to an entire business process can be automated with agentic architectures like Genie. Going into CallSight is, and I say that it's an accelerator and a capability because CallSight is a generative engine that can process any kind of interaction or social media or recording or conversation or message or NPS form and extract insights from them. It's tech agnostic and service agnostic. So it can be deployed on any cloud service and it can use any LLM. It's very light and it can be deployed in one day in any infrastructure.
We're kind of like seeing how the sausage is made. How did BCG decide? Again, I guess I appreciate like there are three pillars. So let's just start with insights, for example. Like, yeah, what was the decision-making process to go like pursue this type of problem? Did you like maybe like manually do this like 5 times and like, okay, cool, we should probably productize this? What was the decision, again, go from like service to product for this vertical?
Why we started this, I've coded the first lines of CallSight myself 3 years ago in India in a project. But this is a huge business problem for companies because companies can't answer a very simple question, which is, why are your customers calling? They do not know. Very simple answer, it's because they had been using the same categories and the same taxonomy for years, and it hasn't been created in a data-driven way. So the problem that we are solving is really using data to define and to extract insights, which is something that didn't happen in the last 20 years. The second thing that we solve is we correlate categories and taxonomies with KPIs, which is something that it seems crazy, but companies don't do it directly. Understanding which topics take more time and have more repeated calls is something that they don't usually look at it, so frequently. We do it. And the third thing that we do is there's a business problem that every contact center has, which is there's huge dispersion between telephonic agents. And I'm talking about 3 to 7 times depending on the metric. In the same contact center with the same tools, same salary, same training, agents have a dispersion of 3 to 7 times in time resolution, repeated calls, sentiment, satisfaction. There's a lot of dispersion. Humans are very different. So that's a huge problem because if you don't have a standard way of executing things and the dispersion is very high, the experience that you give to a customer or the resolution rate that you give to a customer is very different. And these are a lot of inefficiencies. Statistically, if you take the worst ones to the level of the average, you would be bringing a lot of value into your organization. Yeah. And these are all things that we tackle with CallSight.
You mentioned, first of all, like this happened in, you started this project about 3 years ago. So this is like still pre-LM, or at least like pre-ChatGPT, let's call it. Is that correct? Okay, right. How much has, the tech stack / like even like ambition of the project like evolved in a post-LLM world?
This is a great question because we are deploying also a new version of CallSight, which is going to be completely autonomous and low code. So when we started, we needed a couple of engineers and a couple of data scientists to deploy a CallSight. CallSight projects are usually very, very short. They take maximum 4 weeks And in 4 weeks, we can basically have a full picture of the entire contact center. Nowadays, call site takes less time, less people, and our goal is to make it full autonomous. So you just need to express what do you want to see in calls, and call site will basically understand what patterns I need to show you, what questions do I need to make, which variables do I need to extract. The first project that we've done with call site in India was very different because we were using call site to extract variables from collections calls to create a machine learning model. And we were extracting 180 variables to predict the strength of the promise to pay of the person and also which channel was best to allocate a specific customer to optimize the cost of that collection process. We had a great success and we discovered a lot of things that evolve with technology. Now with LLMs, a lot of things are simplified, the summarization of a call, the classification of a call. But we are still using some techniques that are more traditional, like, for example, unsupervised learning for clustering calls, etc., which is much more efficient than using LLM.
I saw a joke on LinkedIn the other day about how post LLMs, like everyone just forgot machine learning is still a thing. But it's interesting, like what people like you at the frontier of actually like building things at scale still like see like, again, the, at least like to your point, like the efficiency frontier, like there's still some value for like traditional ML.
100%. I mean, you don't need to give an LLM a task that can be solved in a cheaper way and in a much more efficient way with, for example, a k-means, as an unsupervised method, because it makes no sense. LLMs are not made to cluster. They are made to probabilistically predict the next token. So, and when I say LLM, it's different to using ChatGPT. ChatGPT is calling a function that it's using then Python to create a clustering unsupervised model. But they are doing the same thing that you're doing, which is completely different than using an open source LLM for clustering a sentence. Most of organizations are focused in cost optimization, which is a big mistake because sometimes cost optimization cases sometimes will not close. The business case is much more attractive when you impact top line, like finding patterns to increase your cross-sell, upsell, or even acquisition of clients,
Great. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. So like AI isn't just changing business processes, right? It's transforming like the roles and skills across industries. What are some new skills and like roles and skill sets that you believe will emerge like in the next 5 years as AI adoption accelerates? Again, you can choose any giving vertical like kind of like CX, if you will, or also like in banking or finance as well.
I think that there are 2 or 3 things that are going to happen heavily, right? I mean, now we will see a lot of companies and organizations creating smaller digital native organizations, but really digital native. So why? A lot of CEOs are asking themselves a simple question. If I would need to start a company today, what would be the shape of that company? Would I have 200,000 employees? Would I have 50,000 employees? Or would this company would be an entirely digital managed company? So a lot of organizations are rethinking in new, smaller companies, making them completely digital native with very few people managing this and very automated organizations. Other companies that I see a lot of transformation about this is BPOs. Business process outsourcers are rethinking because they have everything to lose if they do not transform. The business of a BPO has very large operating costs, and with this launch of technology, they are in a very intricate position because if they do not transform their business as they sell people minutes calls, they would basically disappear. So a lot of these organizations are transforming and shifting from commercializing humans calls into converting themselves into technology companies. And the best example for that is what happened with Teleperformance and Klarna when Klarna announced the automation of 70% of their interactions in the digital channel. Teleperformance stock price decreased 20% in that week. So this was a huge attention call to BPOs. The question is, what will happen when Walmart announces something like this? What's going to happen with the BPOs there? So I think they are moving at a fast pace, and they will be real innovators because they know very well the operations. And this is two industries that I see a huge challenge, and in those shapes. Companies, creating new companies, digital native, with very little people and a very agentic-based management of their processes. And the second one is companies shifting from a, very product-oriented or service-oriented into converting themselves into technology companies.
Yeah, I guess your point about the advantage the incumbents have is, again, like, they understand the processes. So it's like, would, the upstart startups basically like learn the processes before the incumbents learn the technology and deploy quickly. So that's the race that's going on now, isn't it?
That's a great point. I fully agree. The difficult thing is knowing, for technology companies, it's very difficult to acquire all the business knowledge that people that are managing the operations have. Because they don't want to invest in that. It's not their business, You can be a very business process, business-oriented organization, or you can be a very techy organization. But both is complex. People think that Gen AI is more of a scientific challenge, but I would say it's more of an engineering challenge. You will need engineers for this type of tech heavily. Most of the people thought about the largest need was going to be data scientists. It's not the case.
So yes, like, closing question, again, is in two parts. What would you say has and hasn't changed, like, post LLMs, I guess, in your day-to-day job in consulting? So let's start with what hasn't changed, what stayed the same across your engagements.
Good one. I think that our culture as a company and the culture that we also inject in our teams hasn't changed at all. BCG is a very strong in culture, but very familiar company in terms of you create a huge bonding with your teams. Okay, and probably a lot of people think, hey, competitiveness in this company is huge. But I think that we have the right culture in place for competitiveness not to, go against friendship in all our projects. And I think that's very difficult to change, and it will be something that it's not going to be replaced by any technology. I think that we are keeping that. Even working remotely, because after COVID, everything changed, but even working remotely, there's no Gen AI that will change this. And you can see the value when any team meets in a specific location and in a client, the way and the amount of enjoyment that the teams have is something that it's not going to be easily changed. What will change? I think that very soon, understanding also that this is one of the industries that will be mostly disrupted. You see a lot of posts on LinkedIn, hey, we don't need McKinsey or BCG anymore, models can reason for us. I think that partially that's pretty real statement, but we do much more than reasoning, What I think is that the BCGs, the McKinseys, the Bains of the world are the first one that will see this, and will create, yes, digital consultants, digital strategic consultants, digital advisors. But I don't see this as a replacement. I see this as a big opportunity for every smaller company to have the knowledge of our organizations at their hand. For me, and some of the challenges that some companies have is that they can't structure problems as we structure, or make a data analysis as we do, or find the right strategy for their small business, I think that the power of this technology will give those organizations the possibility to have this type of service from consultancy companies at their hand. So I see this as a huge accelerator and a huge opportunity for consultancy companies. Of course, the ones that can adapt to the model, and not a disadvantage. But I think this will change the business, will not just consultancy, but in general, and the methodology of advising clients, clearly.
Well, that's a great place to close. Well, this has been fantastic. Thanks so much for spending that last hour with me. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Bolu.